offense of attempted murder, a violation of Revised Code Section 2923.02A, felony in the first degree. Court defendant serve a term of 11 years in the Ohio Department of Corrections. As to specification 4 to count 1, court defendant serve a term.
On the evening of August 22, 2025, tragedy struck Charlotte's transit system when 23-year-old Iryna Zarutska, a Ukrainian refugee who had fled the war, was fatally stabbed while commuting home on the Lynx Blue Line. Born in Kiev, Iryna studied art and restoration at Synergy College before the Russian invasion forced her family into a bomb shelter for months. In 2022, she moved to the United States with her mother, sister, and younger brother, while her father remained in Ukraine under military restrictions. In North Carolina, she rebuilt her life, learning English, working multiple jobs, enrolling in classes, and even taking driving lessons with her boyfriend. By summer 2025, she was working at a Charlotte pizzeria, finishing her shift on the night she was killed. The suspect, 34-year-old DeCarlos Brown Jr., had a long history of arrests, including breaking and entering, armed robbery, and firearm possession, and had spent more than 5 years in prison. After his release, his mother reported he was diagnosed with schizophrenia, displayed violent behavior, and refused medication. Her attempts to have him involuntarily committed were denied, reflecting North Carolina's strained mental health system, where the average wait for a psychiatric bed was 16 days. By early 2025, Brown was homeless and repeatedly called 911 claiming his body was being controlled by a man-made material. On the night of the killing, surveillance cameras showed Iryna boarding the train and sitting in front of Brown. For minutes later, he pulled a pocket knife from his hoodie and stabbed her 3 times, including once in the neck. Iryna remained conscious for almost a minute before collapsing as nearby passengers failed to intervene until it was too late. Brown exited the train 2 minutes later but was arrested on the platform. Iryna was pronounced dead at the scene. Brown was charged with first-degree murder and ordered to undergo a 60-day psychiatric evaluation before being indicted in both state and federal court. He remains in custody without bond, as a GoFundMe campaign launched in his name was quickly taken down for violating policy against raising legal defense funds for violent crime defendants. The killing provoked outrage in Charlotte and beyond. Mayor Vi Lyles called it senseless and tragic, while council members urged reforms to restore trust in the city's transit system. The Charlotte area transit system pledged increased fare inspections, more security staffing, and new ticket validators. At the same time, the case reignited debates over the failures of America's mental health care and criminal justice systems. Nationally, the story became politicized. Commentators accused the media of bias, Elon Musk blamed prosecutors and judges for letting criminals roam free, and President Donald Trump called the attacker a madman, a lunatic, demanding harsher measures against violent crime. The Ukrainian Foreign Ministry monitored developments closely, while British media described the case as fueling debates about crime in the United States. In the weeks following her death, Charlotte residents held vigils at the East/West Boulevard station, where flowers, candles, and prayers honored her memory. Her family buried her in the United States, the country they had believed would be safe. Murals dedicated to Iryna appeared in cities across America, and Charlotte-born rapper DaBaby released the tribute song, Save Me. For many, Iryna's story is not only a tale of a young life cut short, but also a symbol of systemic failure, highlighting the urgent need for safer public spaces and better support for those battling mental illness. Iryna Zarutska was born in Kiev, Ukraine, a bright and artistic young woman who graduated from Synergy College with a degree in art and restoration. Her life changed forever in 2022 when Russia's full-scale invasion forced her family into a bomb shelter, where they lived for months before making the painful decision to flee. Together with her mother, sister, and younger brother, Iryna sought refuge in the United States, while her father, like millions of Ukrainian men between 18 and 60, was forbidden from leaving and later could not even attend her funeral. In Huntersville, North Carolina, she began to rebuild her life, learning English, taking part-time jobs, enrolling in college courses, and nurturing her dream of an artistic career. Her boyfriend taught her to drive, something her family had never experienced back in Ukraine. By 2025, Iryna was working shifts at a Charlotte pizzeria, and on the night of her death, she had just finished work and boarded the Lynx Blue Line train to head home. The man accused of killing her, 34-year-old DeCarlos Brown Jr., had a long and troubled history. Arrested 14 times in Mecklenburg County, his record included breaking and entering, armed robbery, and illegal firearm possession. He served more than 5 years in prison. After his release, his mother says he was diagnosed with schizophrenia. She begged for him to be involuntarily committed, but courts refused, saying he didn't meet the legal definition of dangerous. By early 2025, Brown was homeless and untreated. He called 911 repeatedly, claiming a mysterious, man-made material inside his body was controlling him. He was charged with misuse of 911 calls, and released without bond. On August 22, cameras captured Iryna boarding the train at Charlotte's South End. She sat down, unaware that behind her sat a man with a knife. For minutes into the ride, Brown pulled the weapon from his hoodie and stabbed Iryna 3 times, once in the neck. For nearly a minute, she struggled to remain conscious, before collapsing to the floor. Though other passengers were nearby, no one acted until she fell. 2 minutes later, Brown exited the train. Police officers, stationed in another car, arrested him on the platform. Iryna was pronounced dead at the scene. After his arrest on August 22, 2025, DeCarlos Brown Jr. was immediately charged with first-degree murder in the death of Iryna Zarutska. Authorities transported him for medical evaluation following his violent outburst on the train, and within days a judge ordered a 60-day psychiatric evaluation at a local hospital to determine his mental competency to stand trial. This decision stemmed from Brown's well-documented history of mental illness, including a prior diagnosis of schizophrenia, his repeated refusal to take medication, and his erratic behavior in the months leading up to the killing, such as calling 911 to report bizarre claims about his body being controlled by a man-made material. By mid-September, a Mecklenburg County grand jury indicted him on the state charge of first-degree murder, a capital offense in North Carolina that can carry life without parole or even the death penalty if prosecutors pursue it. In addition, federal prosecutors stepped in, announcing separate charges under federal transit laws for committing an act causing death on a mass transportation system. This rare dual prosecution underscored both the severity of the crime and its national implications, given that the attack occurred on a city light rail system partially funded by federal dollars. Brown was transferred to the Mecklenburg County Detention Center, where he remains held without bond. Jail officials confirmed that he was placed under heightened supervision, partly due to concerns about his mental stability and partly due to the intense public outrage surrounding the case. As news of his background and the brutality of the attack spread, the legal system prepared for what is expected to be a lengthy and closely watched trial. Prosecutors described the case as both straightforward, in terms of evidence captured on surveillance footage, and deeply complicated, given Brown's psychiatric history and the likelihood that his defense team would argue diminished capacity or outright insanity. Legal experts pointed out that North Carolina courts rarely succeed in long-term involuntary commitments unless a defendant is deemed an immediate danger, and Brown's mother had already gone on record stating she had tried unsuccessfully to have her son hospitalized before the attack. This detail, widely reported in the press, became a central point in early discussions about the failures of the criminal justice and mental health systems to intervene before tragedy struck. Adding to the controversy, a GoFundMe page briefly appeared online seeking donations for Brown's legal defense. Within hours, the platform shut it down, citing company policy that prohibits fundraising for individuals formally charged with violent crimes. GoFundMe representatives issued a statement emphasizing that while the platform allows support for victims, their families, and even defendants in limited circumstances, campaigns intended to cover legal costs for those accused of homicide violate their terms of service. The incident sparked heated debate on social media, where critics blasted the fundraiser as insensitive to the victim's grieving family, while others argued it highlighted the desperation of families coping with loved ones who suffer from untreated mental illness. Meanwhile, prosecutors and defense attorneys began preparing for a legal battle that could extend for years. The state charges, led by the Mecklenburg County District Attorney's Office, will focus on the elements of premeditation and intent, essential to securing a conviction for first-degree murder under North Carolina law. At the same time, the federal case, brought by the U.S. Attorney's Office, will spotlight public safety on mass transit systems, setting the stage for potential reforms and precedent. Court filings indicate that Brown's defense team may pursue an insanity defense, citing his long psychiatric record, past hospitalizations, and delusional behavior documented in police reports. However, under North Carolina's strict legal standard, insanity defenses succeed only in a small fraction of cases, requiring proof that the defendant could not distinguish right from wrong at the time of the crime. Prosecutors, on the other hand, have pointed to the surveillance footage showing Brown calmly boarding the train, concealing the knife, and exiting immediately after the stabbing as evidence of deliberate action rather than random psychosis. Legal analysts suggest that dual prosecutions could raise complicated questions about double jeopardy, though courts generally allow separate state and federal trials when different statutes are involved. The death penalty remains on the table at the state level, though the district attorney has not yet announced whether it will be pursued. Federal prosecutors, meanwhile, have the option of seeking enhanced penalties given that the crime occurred on public transit. Until those decisions are made, Brown's case will remain in pretrial status, with periodic hearings on his mental health evaluations, competency findings, and motions from both sides. The killing of Iryna Zarutska shook Charlotte to its core, sending waves of grief and anger through the community. City leaders were quick to respond, grappling not only with the horror of the crime itself but also with its wider implications. Mayor Vi Lyles called the stabbing senseless and tragic, pledging that the city would take action to restore both safety and public confidence. Councilman Edwin Peacock echoed her concerns, warning that if residents lost faith in the city's transit system, it could undermine years of investment and progress in public transportation. The Charlotte Area Transit System, CATS, soon announced a series of reforms intended to address growing public fears, more frequent fare inspections, an expanded security presence across platforms and trains, and plans to upgrade ticket validators to reduce loopholes and fare evasion. Yet, even as officials promised immediate changes, Iryna's death exposed deeper, systemic failures that extended far beyond transit safety. Local health leaders acknowledged that Mecklenburg County's psychiatric care network was already stretched beyond capacity, with some patients waiting an average of 16 days just for a hospital bed. Advocates argued that this backlog left people like DeCarlos Brown Jr. to spiral without proper treatment, while families desperate for help were left powerless to intervene. In this way, Iryna's killing became more than just a local tragedy. It was a spotlight on the fragile intersections between public safety, mental health, and the criminal justice system in America. The case quickly exploded into national and international news, dominating headlines and talk shows across the United States. Almost immediately, the crime became a flashpoint in the country's polarized political climate. Conservative commentators accused mainstream outlets of downplaying the story, contrasting the extensive coverage given to other killings and suggesting media bias in how victims are portrayed. Elon Musk, the billionaire owner of X, weighed in with a blistering post accusing judges and prosecutors of enabling violence by allowing criminals to roam free. His words echoed a growing chorus of criticism aimed at the justice system's handling of mentally ill offenders. The federal government also became entangled. U.S. Secretary of Transportation Sean Duffy placed blame on Charlotte officials, arguing that local leaders had failed to adequately secure the very transit system that received federal funding. But it was President Donald Trump who took the sharpest tone, describing the accused attacker as a madman, a lunatic, and calling for horrible actions to punish those responsible for such crimes, comments that stirred both applause from supporters and concern from legal analysts. Beyond America, the story reverberated overseas. In Ukraine, the foreign ministry monitored the proceedings closely, as Iryna's fate struck a raw nerve in a nation already scarred by war. Ukrainian media framed her death as a cruel twist of fate, a young refugee escaping Russian bombs, only to be killed in the country that had promised safety. In Britain, major newspapers ran front-page stories describing the killing as an indictment of America's struggle with violent crime, warning that the case had sparked uproar and renewed doubts about whether U.S. cities could protect even their most vulnerable residents. On August 31, 2025, just over a week after her death, hundreds of Charlotte residents gathered in solemn silence at a candlelight vigil to honor the memory of Iryna Zarutska. Friends, co-workers, and neighbors joined complete strangers, many of whom had never met Iryna but felt compelled to stand in solidarity. The vigil was held in a local park, where mourners lit candles, laid flowers, and clutched photographs of the 23-year-old refugee who had fled war only to encounter tragedy in her new home. Several speakers addressed the crowd, including clergy, Ukrainian community leaders, and local officials. They described Iryna as a symbol of resilience, a young woman who represented both the hope and vulnerability of refugees everywhere. Attendees wept openly as her co-workers from the Charlotte pizzeria where she had worked recalled her kindness, her humor, and the way she often shared pieces of Ukrainian culture with her colleagues. Exactly 30 days later, another gathering took place. This time at the very spot where Iryna had been killed, the East/West Boulevard station of the Lynx Blue Line. The platform, usually filled with the hum of commuters, became a space of mourning. Community members set up a temporary memorial, covering the ground with flowers, candles, handwritten notes, and Ukrainian flags. Some placed traditional rushniki, embroidered cloths used in Ukrainian ceremonies, at the site, while others left painted icons or children's drawings depicting peace doves and sunflowers, Ukraine's national flower. Survivors of other violent crimes in Charlotte joined the vigil, uniting their grief with the Zarutska families. For many, this second memorial was not only about honoring Iryna but also about reclaiming the space where violence had occurred, transforming it into a place of remembrance and reflection. Her family, after deep deliberation, made the difficult decision to bury Iryna in the United States. Though their hearts remained tied to Ukraine. And though her father, forbidden by martial law from leaving Kiev, could not attend, they believed that the U.S., the place where she had sought safety and begun to rebuild her life, should also be the place where she found rest. The burial was attended by relatives, local Ukrainians, and American friends who had become like family to the Zarutskas since their arrival. At the graveside service, mourners sang both Ukrainian hymns and English prayers, creating a bridge between the two worlds Iryna had inhabited. For her younger brother and sister, still grappling with the enormity of the loss, the burial marked the cruel end of one chapter but also a beginning, a public acknowledgement that their sister's story had become bigger than them, resonating with people far beyond their family circle. In the weeks that followed, murals honoring Iryna began to appear across America. In Charlotte, a striking piece of street art portrayed her surrounded by sunflowers and doves, with the words, "She sought peace," painted in both English and Ukrainian. In Chicago, home to one of the largest Ukrainian diasporas in the U.S., a community collective painted her likeness on the side of a cultural center. Even in Los Angeles, an artist created a mural blending Ukrainian folk motifs with American urban graffiti, symbolizing the merging of Iryna's two worlds. These public artworks became more than just tributes, they were also rallying cries for change, urging communities to address both the epidemic of violence on American streets and the neglect of mental health systems that allowed tragedies like this to occur. Perhaps the most unexpected tribute came from the world of music. In September 2025, Charlotte-born rapper DaBaby released a heartfelt track titled "Save Me," dedicated to Iryna's memory. The song, a departure from his usual high-energy style, carried a raw, emotional tone, weaving together themes of loss, injustice, and the longing for redemption. In interviews, DaBaby said he felt personally shaken by the killing, not only because it had taken place in his hometown but also because he recognized the universality of Iryna's story, the pursuit of safety, only to be met with senseless violence. The song quickly gained traction online, shared widely by fans and advocacy groups alike, and was even played at rallies calling for stronger protections for women, refugees, and transit riders. For many, it became an anthem of mourning but also of resilience, a reminder that art can give voice to pain when words alone fall short. Together, these memorials, murals, and musical tributes turned Iryna's death into more than just a tragic headline. They became acts of collective remembrance, ensuring that her life and her dreams would not be forgotten. At each gathering, whether under the soft glow of candlelight, against the backdrop of a painted wall, or through the haunting notes of a song, the community reaffirmed a simple truth: Iryna Zarutska's story mattered, and it would continue to matter, long after the headlines faded. Iryna Zarutska's story is one of hope, of escape from war, cut short by violence in the very place she sought refuge. Her death is not only a tragedy, but a mirror, reflecting the failures of justice, the gaps in mental health care, and the urgent need to keep public spaces safe. Her memory endures, as a reminder, and as a call for change. Fade out.